First of all, I do think with time it's gotten easier, especially right now with like European Accessibility Act and like also the
Hmm.
American Accessibility Act. Right? Kind of, it's known to be like important. Like companies can also get sued or get fined, like if their products are not accessible. So I think it's already like more top of mind for folks than it was like maybe several like years ago. How dialogues are implemented. I think historically we've always been doing dialogues in a way that you have a state like is dialog open, true, false, right? And then yeah, you click a button, then you flip that state, and then you render a dialog. But when it comes to accessibility, with both like for the screen readers, but also if you're using the keyboard, there's a lot that comes for you going into the dialog and going out of the dialog. You need to trap focus correctly. You need to return focus when you close the dialog back into the place where you were. When you focus on that button, you need to tell that, hey, this button opens the dialog. And that's something you can't really do, like really, you would need to do a lot of manual work.
Yeah.
So I think using patterns like trigger pattern, right? I think it's quite common where you have like dialog.trigger and then you wrap it. In terms of what to learn, I think learning some of the those foundations that I mentioned, like how it all works, learning how to use a screen reader. I think it's actually something that it sounds intimidating, but especially if you use a Mac, it comes in. And if you want, I can send you like a link with like really good guide on YouTube on how to get started.
Please. Yes.
If you haven't ever like used a screen reader, I would say that trying that and even like trying to use it with the with like some app you're building or like any website, just
Hmm.
learning a few basic commands, it's actually quite advanced. I think there's several things in terms of testing and like making sure that what you're building is accessible. One is just kind of tabbing through, right? Like if you just build it, just go like and just tab through and just try to use it without a mouse. It's like super easy. Make sure that like it's visible when something is in focus and you're able to navigate with tab and arrows and things like that. And then like trying to use the screen reader, for example, like on something you built, like if you're building a component, just try to navigate it using the screener, make sure that it announces everything correctly. I'm also a big fan. Like I think a lot of us do automated testing, right? Like and use
Hmm.
tools like a React testing library or Playwright. We talk a lot about screen readers, but there's different types of assistive tech out there. There's those sip and puff devices, right, that allow you to control the computer with just like blowing into the tube. There's like a lot of switches that you can press. And all of them use like similar foundations. And I think web part of the accessibility is actually really interesting because a lot of the things that we build, like in the DOM HTML elements, and then later get transformed into the accessibility tree that then gets exposed to the assistive technology. So getting all of those foundations right
Hmm.
and understanding how it works.
Our guest today is Kateryna Porchienova, a senior engineering manager at Buffer, where she leads multiple engineering teams and steered the front-end direction. She also champions Buffer's design system, making sure it delivers consistency, accessibility, and a joyful developer experience. She's also one of my favorite speakers. We met at React Alicante, and I enjoy her accessibility talks every year. So welcome, Kateryna. Thank you for joining me today at this podcast.
Thank you for having me. That's such a nice intro. I'm super excited to be here and super excited to see you at React Alicante again this year. It's
Yes.
turning into a nice tradition.
It is. It is. I think is it our third or fourth year? I don't remember exactly. I think third.
Yeah, I think third with meeting you at Alicante, and for me, I think it's like fourth time as a speaker there.
Oh, nice.
It's a special conference for
That's very cool. What are you gonna talk about this time? What's your talk?
yeah, I'm gonna talk about animation. I kind of like my talks like to be something like giving you like 80% of information to get you 80% there. Did I
Mm-hmm.
say it right? 20% of information to get you 80% there. So I had like the accessibility talk like that. Like last year it was the responsive UI, and now it's gonna be about animation.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about CSS animation and some Spring libraries and how to make animation.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
quite excited. I'm actually in the process of preparing it. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. I mean, I think this episode is gonna air after React Alicante, so we can spoil it a little bit if you if we can discuss some stuff about it. Is it gonna be React focused or just CSS?
It's going to be React focused, but also like just covering a lot of different things on how to implement animation, which tool to use in in each case, like where, for example, to use CSS transitions or keyframes, where to use like an animation library like React Motion, and where use maybe something like view transitions, which is also pretty
Hmm.
cool. So covering the full spectrum of things, hopefully just giving a bunch of tools in the toolbox. I do feel that animation becomes extra important right now because the cost of just spinning up like a basic UI is so much lower. So I think the differentiation becomes more in the details. So um,
I also think it's also because, how you have all these AI platforms that just generate websites now, like generic every day, like, and now you have to get ahead and do something different. And I think animation is a big part of it.
yeah. I think the quality of the UI itself, like quality of the interactions, and animation as part of that, I think kind of becoming more differentiators, like between like the products that kind of succeed as well and like and stand out among the others. Yeah, I do feel that it's kind of the quality of craft is having a comeback, and I think that that's kind of really cool.
That's very cool. So tell me a little bit about yourself. When did you start your journey in programming? What was the first steps?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So I think the first steps were back in high school. I was kind of really lucky to be in the high school where we had a computer class, which wasn't very common at the time. So, and we had some programming classes, and I kind of started we learning Pascal and things like that, and I started programming a little bit. And I really liked it because you could create something that does something for you. Which was really fun, and then I got into competitive programming because I was doing well in some of those classes. They kind of sent me on those Olympiads. I'm not sure whether you have them,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
we used to have them, and that was also like solving tasks with like how to I don't know like a best route to deliver something or whatnot.
Hmm.
So I think that's how it started, and then I was like even despite doing that and kind of being quite interested in programming and building something and like also getting more into the web side of things as well. I didn't really picture myself as a programmer at a time, and so I when I got into university, even though I did get into the computer science, I didn't think I would become a programmer. I don't know, just some notions in my head that it's like for
Hmm.
dudes in their like 40s with like beards. And, I think at the time, especially like I didn't know what I think programming was and was also changing at the time as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then kind of with my first job, I was in a role of it was called optimization engineer. It's kind of like solutions engineering. I know, like helping customers to earn more money. Like it was a payments company. Um, and I was like trying to find how to optimize different payment widgets. And I often needed to like send requests to the engineering team, hey, like fix this so that we like the customer can get like more revenue. And then I get really annoyed with that because it was always really slow. And I started doing it
Hmm.
myself. And then I kind of transitioned to be an engineer and learned that it was actually kind of fun and creative, and not what I pictured. And it kind of started from there.
That's really, really cool. And when did it go, like, if you went algorithms and stuff like that, to front end? When did you make that leap?
I think it was like because of that was like the payment platform was all web based, like payment widgets, like in different gaming sites and like others. There's like different, like how you pay, and then there's like a bunch of different payment methods. So it was like that it was web based. So I think that's how I started. I did build a few websites even before that, with CSS tables and things like that. But I always enjoyed the visual part of it, like making something that like feels nice and looks nice. And so I kind of it felt a little bit more natural. And then after that job, um, second job was already with React, and React at that time was like really new. It was like zero something version. Nobody used it
Okay.
at the time, so it was really early, and I got like a bit lucky to be in a place where it was like early adopters. And so yeah, that's kind of how it started and how I got into React as well.
And I'm guessing you're a big React fan, right? Like all of us here.
I do. I do love React, and especially it was really interesting seeing how it evolves and some of the recent new features as well. I don't know, and it's nice that it's started like I think it's here to stay as well.
For sure, for sure. And how did you get into accessibility? Like, did it become naturally part of your job? What was the thing that made you really like it and, let's say, be an expert in this subject?
I'm not sure whether I would call myself an expert. I think there's quite a few folks who like definitely know like a lot more than me. I wouldn't call myself like, let's say, an accessibility engineer, but I was always curious about it, and I think
Mm-hmm.
inclusion was always important to me. And actually, a funny story. The first application ever that I built in high school, it was like a learning app. Basically, it was like there's like an app that a teacher had and an app that students had like on their machines. I built it for my school first. Um, because we had this special class where like some students got their laptops, like it's mini laptops in like second grade or something, and they were like learning on them. And so I built that app. It was a C++ app at a time.
Okay.
And then in my city, they had a program for children with disabilities to learn at home, and they started using my application to do that. And so I think that was how my first time got exposed to it. At the time, I didn't really know much about like the web accessibility side of things. But then when working already at Varief, like when I already moved to Estonia, we also had some, like we were developing the design system and we wanted to make sure it was accessible and wanted to conduct the audits. And I think that was like the first time I was really exposed to it. It's really interesting. And did I answer your question?
Yes, yes, for sure. Always like for me, for example, I always hit accessibility when I need to, which is not the best case. Like, for example, the company I work on sells to universities and we have to be accessible, of course, but it's actually hurt us when there's something that we're not accessible at, right? Like, what are some best practices that you would recommend someone like keep up to date with accessibility practices? What do you recommend us do?
Oh, that's interesting. I would say it's kind of hard to keep up to date because there's always like, there's a lot of things, different screen readers work a little bit differently. I think there's a few interesting like blogs to follow
Mm-hmm.
and like different accounts. I think that can help to be up to date. I do think that investing into getting good foundations, like to even understand how does assistive technology works, like what assistive technology, like what are different types of assistive technologies, right? We talk a lot about screen readers, but there's different types of assistive tech out there. There's those sip and puff devices, right, that allow you to control the computer with just like blowing into the tube. There's
Yeah.
like a lot of switches that you can press. And all of them use like similar foundations. And I think web part of the accessibility is actually really interesting because a lot of the things that we build, like in the DOM HTML elements, and then later get transformed into the accessibility tree that then gets exposed to the assistive technology. So getting all of those foundations right
Mm-hmm.
and understanding how it works would then, I think a lot of it doesn't really change as much. There's of course like some newer features that get released, but usually they're very slow to get adopted by different screen readers. So I wouldn't say that it's like a very ever-changing space. So I think just learning those foundations and then depending on the task, kind of finding way to apply them. Uh, I would say that would be maybe my uh, advice.
That's cool. For my listeners that don't really know about accessibility because it happens, what are like the main things you recommend developers do? Let's say React developers. What should they focus on?
In terms of learning, like what should they learn
Yeah, what
or
you should
focus
learn
on?
and what should they code? Like how when they're coding, what should they pay attention to?
Okay. So let's start with the first part in terms of because I think it then enforces the second part, right? In terms of what to learn, I think learning some of the those foundations that I mentioned, like how it all works, learning how to use a screener. I think it's actually something that it sounds intimidating, but especially if you use a Mac, it comes in. And if you want, I can send you like a link with like really good guide on YouTube on how to get started.
Please. Yes.
If you haven't ever like used a screen reader, I would say that trying that and even like trying to use it with the with like for example, app you're building or like any website, just
Hmm.
learning a few basic commands. It's actually quite advanced tech, right? There's like a lot of shortcuts and a lot of things, but you don't really need a lot to get by as an engineer, right? Just learning how to navigate like by headings, like maybe use a rotor. So I would say that that's an important thing to learn, and generally like understanding good like what are some of the semantic HTML elements and how to use them. That gives like a really good foundations. In terms of the accessibility itself, I mean, there's of course we have WCAG, which is like Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which a lot of the accessibility regulations are typically um, informed by. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think you need to like learn WCAG. I think you just need to learn to use it, like for when you are searching for something. I think with AI especially, you just need to learn like what to ask to get like really good information, like how to check that it's accurate. But mainly, I would say maybe learning how to use semantic HTML, like an ARIA attributes. And in terms of ARIA specifically, I would say like live agents is something that's a little bit more tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's quite important, especially if you're building something interactive. So how to announce some things like as they happen, different notifications and errors. And I'm also happy to share some of the resources that can kind of explain them well. And then once you have those foundations, then just applying them in day to day. So now kind of maybe shifting to the second part of your question. I think there's several things in terms of testing and like making sure that what you're building is accessible. One is just kind of tabbing through, right? Like if you just
Mm-hmm.
build it, just go like and just tab through and just try to use it without a mouse. It's like super easy. Make sure that like it's visible when something is in focus and you're able to navigate with tab and arrows and things like that. And then like trying to use the screen reader, for example, like on something you built, like if you're building a component, just try to navigate it using the screener, make sure that it announces everything correctly. I'm also a big fan. Like I think a lot of us do automated testing, right? Like and use
Mm-hmm.
tools like a React Testing Library or Playwright, and a lot of the nowadays like the testing libraries they have semantic selectors, and so I think kind of forcing yourself a little bit to use those instead of like maybe falling onto like you get by test ID or like other ones, like they're a little bit more choosing the semantic ones, like get by um, accessible, like reading accessible description, um, get by label, get by placeholder. I think that those can also like force to make sure that the semantic structure is there. But also I think right now there's so much like really good libraries
Mm-hmm.
that you don't even need to like really build the foundations because they're kind of hard to build. Like it's really hard to like build, for example, a fully accessible notification system. Right? But you
Mm-hmm.
can take something like Radix or React Aria, and they already did a lot of research and have those like unstyled library that you can use. You just need to make sure that you preserve like all of those important pieces and make it apply them.
That's pretty cool. I've never used React Area actually. Can you tell me what it is? How to use it?
I honestly haven't really used it a lot. I mean, I do follow it, and I think we use it at Buffer for a few smaller things. But it's kind of like a library, similarly to like Radix, for example, is, but it has a little bit different structure. It's mostly based on hooks, so you can just have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of hooks, and then you pass the information those hooks return into your six, right? And they provide a lot of the accessibility attributes. So whereas like Radix, for example, there's a lot of compound components that you can
Mm-hmm.
use in style. React Aria is like mostly built on hooks, but there's of course like there's React Aria, there's components there as well. It's just a little bit different, but there's a lot of really good stuff in there. Like for example, especially Radix currently doesn't really release a lot of newer components. If you need something that's like maybe a little bit more complex, I think React Aria can be a good choice. And you can actually combine them. Like there's nothing says that you just need to use one, right? You can choose
Mm-hmm.
like Radix for one set of things and then use React Aria for other set of things.
That's pretty interesting. I'm gonna check it out. I mostly built everything from scratch, and yeah, I have my own component library. I'm old school, and I don't like to use for. I also suffered this in the past where it was really hard to migrate once you are locked in with a specific library. So I'm very scared of them, but I think I'll use it. Have you ever used for testing? Like I know Storybook has some accessibility tests or best practices. I think Playwright also has exactly what you mentioned, like where you search elements by area role and stuff like that. What are the tools you would recommend as part of this accessibility ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a good question. So definitely, there's like a lot of automated tools. Right? Yeah, Storybook has that plugin. Like if you use Storybook, it's like very cheap, just like add the plugin, right? It can at least surface some of the violations. Then there's some dev tools, like you can just run Lighthouse audit, for example, or use Axe dev tools to also find some things in an automated way. React, like for example, ESLint, there's a plugin for accessibility as well. I think that one's quite nice, just to make sure that you're not, for example, putting some attributes on elements that don't support them. So it helps to catch that quite well. I'm thinking, what else? I mean, there's also, I actually think AI is kind of nice if you know how to use it, because sometimes it just hallucinates and gives you like very like not necessarily hallucinates, but just overdoes it. Like I think that's very common. Like if you like make it accessible, just will go like overboard, and then it will make it worse. But if you kind of, especially if you get those foundations right, I think I often do use AI myself, like to make sure that like I don't forget something. Or if you use tools like Code Rabbit, for example, for code reviews, you can also ask it to like check some specific things in terms of accessibility. I think that actually can be quite powerful. The one thing to know is that, first of all, like sometimes check like the results, but also that tendency to almost overdo the accessibility, which is actually more common than you can think, because there was even this statistic. I was using it for one of my talks, but that websites that use ARIA attributes have like more errors than websites without. So I
Yeah.
think there's just, you need to know how to use it responsibly.
I also think the browser or screen readers are smart enough to detect elements and infer area data without you messing it up. Like if you put an empty area label, is worse than not having area labeled at all, right?
Yeah. Or often people like sometimes, let's say you have a button like add to cart, right? And it has like text written inside add to cart. What I often sometimes see is that people also put like an area label on it, and then it has like a different name. Like for example, put this product in cart, something usually longer, right? But it's interesting because it actually overrides that label. And it can be harmful. First of all, often these are like very verbose. People using screen readers, they're used to the web, right? You don't need to like really give like too much information, right? Or make it like overly verbose. But additionally, there's also other like accessibility tools. Like there's this voice control, actually also built in on macOS. Like it's fun to try it. But you can speak like something, click add to cart. And then if you overrode that accessible name using ARIA label, for example, you wouldn't it wouldn't work, just because like it doesn't know like what to trigger. So I think that's where like relying on the foundations and like native HTML, and only when you cannot, like absolutely cannot resolve it with native HTML, then like you can add like ARIA attributes. I think that's where like AI often just overdoes it, just like adds a bunch of like ARIA attributes where they are not needed. And so yeah, just like watching out for that. But I think it can be like a really nice tool to like go and check like the VCAG or like some of the best practices. We just need to know like what to watch out for.
Yeah. And speaking about AI, because I had this idea for a while, we've seen how AI has grown the last 3 years, but it's mostly been on writing code, right? Other stuff, but I feel like 80% of it has been used to write code. And I'm thinking how cool it would be if AI can actually make screen readers better, like because it can take the source and it can understand what this app is doing and help better the person with disabilities navigate the website. Do you think it's realistic in the near future, or what do you think AI is going to help on that
Yeah,
side?
I actually been thinking about this a lot, because I actually think it is really powerful. Like what you can do, like even just either like understanding the source code, but also just looking visually, right, and interpreting the visual page. I think the question for me is like, is there money in this sphere for for anybody to build a product? I think it would be cool if it is built, but I'm not sure that's like the area that maybe gets a lot of investment. I haven't. Also, I do think that there's already some aspects of existing AI tools that can make it a lot easier for folks, for example, with disabilities, like dictation, for example, right? There's a lot of tools for dictation, and can be such a useful tool. Like when, for example, you have some motor disabilities, to like really dictate and they get like a lot better. I think that's really cool. Or like instructing AI to do certain things. it gets better, but I think my biggest question is it something like, is there like a lot of mostly the AI tools are also quite expensive, right? Because you have
Yeah.
like a lot of those incurred costs with tokens you need to pay for the APIs. And
Yeah, it's
so
too
the
expensive.
question, but also it also feels like if you would charge like a lot for this tool, like so you would create barriers, right, for people using it, but also would you be able to get investment to maybe offset some of those costs? So I think those are like the things that I'm kind of battling with, because that would be amazing if it existed and somebody built it.
Yeah. I actually saw a guy in Romania. I think I have him on LinkedIn or something. He builds glasses for, I think, deaf people, that it helps translate in the glasses what people are talking about next to him, right? Like, or
The
directly to him.
subtitles kind of like written.
It creates subtitles, yeah, which I think it's
It's really
insane.
cool.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. Right now, there's also some tools like where you kind of use your camera and it kind of describes a little bit, right? Like what is
hmm
there. But I haven't seen anything. Maybe I'm just like I haven't really searched for it like in a while. But I haven't seen anything specifically for like improving the screen reader experience, like navigating the web
yeah, no,
specifically.
me neither. No, I think it's also like the big screen readers are very, and the software surrounding them are old, right? I
Yeah,
haven't seen anything really new, wow, or and we should have something there. Like we should have.
yeah. I think I guess Apple kind of innovates sometimes like with the screen readers, right? Right now they do a little bit of some AI with like if image doesn't have an alt text, kind of you can turn it on and then it will kind of look at the like I don't know, analyze the image and then generate
Interpret
it.
it. Wow.
Um, but they also have the resources to do that, right? Most of the other screeners that exist, they are not part of the big company like Apple, right? They need to kind of exist somehow differently. But also they're very slow, like in terms of the development pace. Like even some of the newer attributes might exist, they're really cool, but they're just not supported. So you can't really like use them. And if you would use them, a lot of people might not have kind of access to them. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of it's quite tricky. Yeah, if you get
Yeah.
deep into it.
But I think even this, like the fact that it can interpret an image, should be part of every screen reader, right? So you don't need to describe what the image does. Maybe draw the picture somehow more easily for people. I think that would be really cool to have in the
Yeah.
future.
I just think that something that already is happening is that like a lot of tools like where you upload an image, they do it at that point, right? So like where the images come from, they are either static and then it's likely maybe something that developers like should do. But if it's that dynamic content, it's created by somebody, and typically you're asked like provide an alt text. But I think this is also where like a lot of companies like can just like pre-generate an alt text for you that you can maybe edit later to like remove that friction. I think that's also where the opportunity is, not necessarily on the software that looks at it, but also making sure that the content that comes in already has more of that, more information.
Yeah, I agree. So speaking, I really like the button example with not adding a label and overriding what the button has inside of it. Are there any other faux pas that, how do I say it? Like mistakes people do? Like what are the most common mistakes you saw people do in terms of accessibility that make their
Hmm.
product less accessible?
You mean in terms of overdoing accessibility, right?
Yeah, or like typical HTML mistakes,
Hmm.
React mistakes, whatever. What
Yeah.
mistakes have you seen people do and they should avoid?
Yeah. I mean, one is like, not using semantic HTML, right? So, but sometimes like also overusing semantic HTML, like using it like a little bit like too much. Like it also can be, it also that you kind of need to like look at it like in a balanced way is to make sure that it provides enough structure, but it also doesn't like introduce like just too much where it just becomes harder to like navigate the page. So, but I think like I'm using, sure you would use like things like sections and footers, but also assign proper roles for dynamic content, like using role alert for errors and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of errors in React, I think one of the really common ones is also in regards with how dialogues are implemented. I think historically we've always been doing dialogues in a way that you have a state like is dialog open, true, false, right? And then yeah, you click a button, then you flip that state, and then you render a dialog. But when it comes to accessibility, actually with both like for the screeners, but also if you're using the keyboard, there's a lot that comes for you going into the dialog and going out of the dialog. You need to trap focus correctly. You need to return focus when you close the dialog back into the place where you were. When you focus on that button, you need to tell that, hey, this button opens the dialog. And that's something you can't really do, like really would need to do a lot of manual work.
Yeah.
So I think using patterns like trigger pattern, right? I think it's quite common where you have like dialog.trigger and then you wrap it. And like this is what all these libraries provide. And then it can just put all of those correct attributes onto your interactive element. I think that's also something that I see a lot. Another one, of course, like missing labels, like missing information. Often and I think that happens often, especially in like more complex UIs, because you want to fit a lot of content on the screen and you have a lot of icon buttons and inputs, maybe with just like an icon there describing what it is. And that's totally fine. I do think there's like some line like where you maybe like where you still need to introduce a label, but in many cases, we're like a lot of customers, like a lot of users are very used to these kind of UIs, like hovering a button to understand what it does and things like that. But I think what, in terms of implementation, you need to make sure that there's still some kind of semantic description. My favorite way to do it is using visually hidden text, right? So there's this very famous like HTML CSS snippet, and it basically just visually hides the content, but keeps it in the DOM and keeps it very accessible. And that's like one of my favorite like utilities. You just create a visually hidden component or a class and you just like put it on those elements. So you would still provide like necessary semantic structure, but it wouldn't be like visible in the UI. So using something like this for icon buttons, for the label, or for inputs that don't have like a visible label, I think that's also like a common thing I see. Another one is also the how you hide the content. There's also like often have some kind of like collapsible sections, or maybe there's something hidden. But if you try, for example, focusing, sometimes you might be able to focus on something that's invisible. So I think tackling those states really well is also something that I often see, like even just using the websites, I just like I tab through and oh wow, where's my focus go? it just disappeared. And it's often like it's something that's maybe just has opacity 0 or something like that. So for that, like just using also the focus, like in CSS, for example, to show then the element is quite important. Like it also comes back like often with hover actions, which we have a lot. Like we have a card, you want to hover on that, card, and you want to show some buttons. Very common pattern. But there's like several things you need to do to make sure that it's still accessible. Like also making sure that they show up when you focused on the one of the buttons inside, but also handling devices that maybe don't support hover functionality at all, and like then disabling that. In the animation as well, by the way, it's also something that I would say kind of see a lot. There's also we actually even had some reports at Buffer as well. There were some animations that we didn't disable, like when you have a reduced motion turned on your computer, and it can just make people sick, right? Like, so just respecting those preferences, or like maybe the mistake then is like not respecting those preferences. For animation, especially the one that's quite large, I think small kind of fade in, fade out is totally fine. But when you have something that moves or palisades or like shifts the screen, so I think those are the ones like you need to make sure you wrap it with a media query with the prefers reduced motion. Yeah, those are some things that come to mind.
And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff you have to do with accessibility. How do you recommend people like bring it up to their company? Like, let's say, advocate for accessibility, because it takes time. It takes time out of your development capacity. So how do you recommend engineers advocate for this inside the companies?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. First of all, I do think with time it's gotten easier, especially right now with like European Accessibility Act and like also the American Accessibility Act, right? It's known to be like important. Like companies can also get sued or get fined, like if their products are not accessible. So I think it's already like more top of mind for folks than it was like maybe several like years ago. which I think made it easier. So I think you're just surfacing that, like, hey, there's like some of these regulations and things like that. One thing that I think works is something I often see is like, for example, you have a feature, you need to, I don't know, develop this, and you say, okay, we can develop this in 2 days, but then if we want to make it accessible, then it's like 3 days. I think that's kind of the conversation where you would have like a lot of pushback, like why it's so long, and things like that. I would say maybe like, and sometimes it take some long, but I don't think it needs to be a conversation on a feature level. It needs to be a conversation on kind of maybe what are some of our standards as a company level, so you can just agree that, hey, like we try to make everything accessible, and then you just kind of build into how you do work so that you don't even need to ask about it like in day to day. So I think that also something that I would say works. So just agreeing on that, we embed maybe like accessibility into normal development, and maybe embed like some accessibility testing into normal, like kind of, if you have some kind of QI processes or things like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to have conversations on every specific feature. It's just how you do development. You don't need to ask about it. It's just like, this is how we do things. Like it's
Yeah.
not like how automated tests, right? Uh, yeah, we don't have, I don't know, maybe sometimes do, but conversations, hey, like writing a test for it would take extra. It's just how you do work. So
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like I do that, but it also helps when you have people who understand what accessibility is, and you have to somehow talk about it a lot more inside of your company if you're not doing it.
yeah, yeah, I think advocates kind of really help. Like I think if you, especially if you have a company where like there's not maybe a lot of that notion, like having a few folks who are kind of advocating, especially in different roles, like maybe somebody in the design team, somebody like from the product managers, like a few folks in engineering. So I think having kind of that, like almost like a group of folks who are like can help advocate in different aspects of product development journey, it can be helpful.
Cool, cool. Okay, Katerina, one more question. What's your favorite book that you could recommend to some of my readers?
My favorite book. Wow. So in terms of like non-technical, just for fun, I've been kind of quite enjoying fantasy recently. I think if you haven't like really read a lot of fantasy, I think the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson is like really fun, like
Yeah.
series to get into. So I would recommend that one. In terms of like more like work related books, there's a few books that I often do recommend, especially for engineers. Like especially right now in Buffer, we do a lot of hiring,
Hmm.
and sometimes I also write feedback to like folks for candidates, and then also recommend some books. Like the ones that often come up is like one is Inspired about like product development. I think it helps to kind of understand the product lens and help we get better into being better partner to like product managers, designers. And then also really love the book. It's kind of really old book, but nonviolent communication.
Hmm.
It's quite old book, and there's some things that like maybe didn't like age like fully well, but I think a lot of the things from there, I remember reading it, and I was really kind of changed a little bit how I communicate and understand people. And I think a lot of our work is working with people, and working with people you don't always necessarily maybe agree on like different aspects. So I think having some of those skills is useful. uh, yeah,
Amazing.
sorry. It's been a few books. Yeah.
No, no, it's great. I love books. After every
Yeah,
podcast
I see.
episode, I order a new book from my guests. So I like reading. So
Yeah,
thank you so much. So
yeah.
thank you so much for joining. It has been a pleasure talking to you. It's been amazing. I think my listeners are gonna love the new accessibility feedback and advice you've given them. So thank you for coming, and see you in Alicante.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to see you. And yeah, was so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a nice day.